Yeah, hello guys. Yeah, so quick live stream. I'm literally just gonna go through a Patrick Bet David um, explanation on history of Russian-Ukraine conflict. So yeah, so let's go. Let's go straight away because I don't have much time.
So there's a lot of worry about Russia, Ukraine, World War III because Biden said, hey, you can use long-range missiles against Russia, and then Ukraine, they did. And then Putin comes out and sends the hypersonic missiles without any nuclear weapons in it. But if he did, what does that look like? How quickly does it go? And the argument is very weird because both sides will say things like, well, Russia didn't hold their end of their bargain when we, in 1991, the Budapest Agreement, when we gave them the 1,700 nuclear weapons that were left in Ukraine, we said we will give this back over to you as long as you no longer attack us and you give us security, and they didn't hold their end of their bargain. But then the other side is like, well, wait a minute. You also told us you're never going to join NATO, but now you are. But to fully understand this, we have to, one, see the people that say, no, Putin's the reason to blame. It's all his fault. We have to see their arguments. And no, NATO and Ukraine is the reason. And then we also got to look at the timeline of what the history looks like, what events took place, what different negotiations happened in the past. And then when you look at this, you're kind of like, whoa, I don't know if I agree with those guys. And I don't know about this. We're going to talk about all that stuff today.
Yeah, just a quick. So yeah, this situation is so complicated. Like I'm trying as well to figure out what's going on. Like myself, I'm from Lithuania. Yeah, so I'm literally from the Baltic countries, which ones are next to Russia, and yeah, we've been how to say part of Russia for a long time as well, until 1991, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Uh, but yeah, so I'm so confused as well what actually happened. And I'm very curious to hear what Patrick Bet is about to say because I following him. I follow him PBD for a really long time. I think since he started his YouTube channels and all that. Uh, and I'm really want to see what he got to say about it. Let's go.
If you get value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Keep in mind, we're going to go through a timeline on what happened. Some of the stuff we'll talk about, you'll agree with some of the stuff you won't. But again, that's the whole purpose of this commentary. We'll even look at the map of how Russia grew the last 300-400 years since 1600s and what they owned, what they lost, what happened. All of that stuff will go through it as well. But to go back through history, the most important thing to know is the fact that most of modern Ukraine was under Russia or Soviet control roughly 337 years from 1667 to 1991, and approximately 90.76% of modern Ukraine history was under Russian or Soviet control. We're talking 91%, give or take. However, on December 1st, 1991, over 90% of Ukrainians voted for independence in a nationwide referendum reflecting widespread domestic support. And keep in mind, this is the time where Ronald Reagan, you hear the stories about the fact that, hey, Russia, look at you. Everybody drives the same car. They live in the same apartment. There's no competition. Nothing's taking place. Here's what you need to be doing. And there was an NGO that Reagan was one of the founders, I think in 1983, called the National Endowment for Democracy, that was started in early 80s. And they're going on saying free speech, free market, civil society, rule of law. Gorbachev is watching saying maybe it's not a bad idea. And in 1990, Gorbachev accepted Germany's reunification and its continued membership in NATO under the explicit condition that NATO would not expand past Germany. NATO says you don't have to worry about it, even to the point that
That's crazy, isn't it? That's like crazy past Germany. Okay, so how I understand, it wasn't like a written contract, something like that. It was like a promise, like a man's word, kind of. And yeah, probably is gonna explain how it's literally expanded way beyond Germany.
U.S. Secretary of State Jim Baker, German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher made verbal assurances, I give you my word, verbal assurances to Mikhail Gorbachev in February of 1990. Baker was famously known for saying that NATO would move not 1 inch eastward, beyond Germany. So imagine you're Russia, you're Gorbachev, we made a great deal. hey guys, let's make this work, totally fine. We're willing to accept capitalism. We're willing to accept some of the democracy, Western way of living. We'll take it, but let's make a deal. Yeah, listen, you ain't got to worry about it. We're going to be okay. This is what we're going to do. And then later on, it changed. Now, keep this in mind. When you're saying not 1 inch eastward, look at the map now. not 1 inch eastward of Germany.
Yeah, guys, look at that. This is crazy, isn't it? It's all the Baltic countries right here. Yeah.
Look who now they expanded to. What do you think you're going to be thinking about if you're Russia? What's Russia's priority? Russia. So you just made a deal, and then you're looking at this map saying, hey guys, what the hell are you doing? Well, what happened to Margaret Thatcher, Jim Baker? What happened to Kohl? What happened to the German chancellor? All these promises. What is this all about? Right? So this is where it's like, well, maybe these guys are not keeping their word. Now, let's go back again, 1991. The Chicken Kiev speech refers to an address by President Bush, George H.W. Bush, on August 1st, 91, said to Supreme Soviet Union of the Ukrainian SSR in Kiev. In the speech, Bush cautioned against suicidal nationalism. Hey, guys, Ukraine, it's a suicide. If you want to kind of talk about Ukrainian nationalism, you've been part of these guys for all these years, but this is a suicide mission you're on. You sure you want to do this? You don't want to do it. We want to do it. Are you positive? We want to do it. It's a suicide mission you're on. They're going to come after eventually. No, we're going to do it. That's the warning that Bush gave to them at that time. And I keep in mind, the timing of this is interesting because this is August 1st, 91. And then December 1st, 91, 3 months later, over 90% of Ukrainians voted. So think about the timing. He's saying, you may not want to do this. You know, this whole nationalism, because in Ukraine at the time, they had the Azov battalion, which part of it they had built that was the Nazi symbol with the wolf sign. We've seen these.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I never literally looked into it. All this Nazi symbol thing that happened a while ago with this battalion, Ukrainian battalion. It's just strange as well. Okay, let's see what you got to say.
He's before in documentaries. He's saying, guys, you're making a mistake. Do not do this. He's warning them. Shortly after that, we're talking exactly 19 days later on December 20th, Boris Yeltsin in 91 writes a letter after the dissolution of Soviet Union. He sent a letter to NATO suggesting that Russia was open to the idea of joining the alliance. Think about this. Russia is open to joining the alliance. Yeltsin framed the request as part of Russia's effort to foster closer relations with the West and to establish itself as a democratic nation. Now, the obvious question will be, what did NATO say? Well, NATO is not going to respond to them. They didn't. They're like, oh, okay, cool. That's nice of you to want to do this. But if we kind of do this, we built NATO specifically to go against you. If you now join us, now we're not needed. If we're not needed, what are we going to do with military-industrial complex? That's a big business model, making billions of dollars. Peace is not a good business model if you're selling weapons. Why would we want peace? Don't tell anybody this. Let's just kind of let this thing go. We know Yeltsin's trying to get some peace stuff going over here. No. NATO was shut down. Then what happens? A lot of people didn't want that. Now, keep in mind when 1991...
That's the other mind-blowing thing. If this is like one of the major reasons why all these wars keep going. I mean, like all the conflict between United States and Russia, the most. If that is just because of money, because of some people who's behind all this defense contracts and weapon manufacturing and NATO and all that stuff, if that's because of money, that's why they didn't keep a tight peace, like inviting Russia to join NATO and all that stuff. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. But probably we will never know. This is just speculations.
What's going on, that whole nuclear weapons that we talk about that Ukraine had leads to the Budapest Memorandum 1994, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, UK, and US. And at the time when Ukraine declared independence of Soviet Union in 99, it inherited the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, 1,700 nuclear warheads for intercontinental.
It's crazy. Yeah, so Ukraine had 1,700 nukes. Imagine that if they still had that, Russia just would not invade them because you know the risks. But now they just cannot protect themselves, so they have to go and beg from United States, UK, NATO, whatever to help them. which is all this conflict. As like I'm saying, is just insane, just insane. Okay, let's continue.
So ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and strategic bombers. They gave it back. They just said, make sure you protect us. Again, this is the part where they go back and forth. Fast forward 2 years later, Ukraine writes their first post-Soviet constitution in 96 with the help of US. Then again in 2000, similar to what Yeltsin said, 9 years prior to that, Putin comes out and says, look, in an interview with BBC, they would consider joining NATO if it were treated as an equal partner. However, this was more of a rhetorical statement to gauge NATO's willingness to engage with Russia on equal terms rather than a formal proposal. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a clip of Tucker interviewing Putin where Putin explains, when Clinton was here right next door, I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think about the idea of us joining NATO? He said, that's an interesting idea. Let me talk to my team. Then they go and he talks to his team and they come back and says, no, not right now. Maybe later on. That's a conversation that took place between Clinton and Putin that he talked about on Tucker. So even though he may have been interested, NATO was not interested in having Russia join.
So the other thing is, I don't understand how, like, why wouldn't you let them join NATO as well and make this one big alliance? And I don't know.
NATO. Why? It's a fair question for you to ask. Why wouldn't they want him to join NATO? Would it eliminate the idea of NATO? What would happen there? Again, moving along with the timeline. This is 2000. He's asking to join NATO. Then 9/11 happens, which is a year and a half later. When that takes place, Putin comes out publicly being one of the first leaders to give solidarity and willingness to cooperate with U.S. in combating terrorism. He was reportedly the first leader to call President Bush on the day of attacks, expressing condolences and the support, emphasized that Russia understood the pain of terror, referencing Russia's own experiences with terrorist attacks, particularly in Chechnya, but Putin condemned the attacks as a barbaric act of terrorism against innocent people and offered Russian solidarity with the American people. Then 2 months later, November of 2001, he supports the U.S. in Afghanistan. Putin backed the U.S.-led military intervention in Afghanistan to dismantle al-Qaeda and Taliban. Russia provided crucial logistic assistance, including opening Russian airspace for U.S. and NATO flights. Think about that. Most people forgot that. That's 23 years ago they're sitting there saying, hey, we know you.
Actually, I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that. That was so long ago that I was still a little child. I still remember the day of 9/11. But I didn't understand absolutely what's going on there, and politics, zero. And that's crazy. So they've been so close together to fight terrorism, isn't it? And now look, the worst enemies. Crazy.
You guys are doing this. Whatever you need, we're here to help you. Think America, Russia, whatever you need, we're helping you in NATO. We don't hear this story often when that took place, when they're helping Afghanistan, right? Facilitating the use of Central Asian bases by U.S. forces, sharing intelligence on Afghanistan terrorist networks. Putin has never been a fan of terrorist organizations, and he's openly described terrorism as a common enemy of both Russia and the U.S., signaling a shared commitment to global counterterrorism. This is good. This is 23 years ago. So at this time, November 2001, America's like, oh, okay, he's helping us out. Afghanistan, this was cool. We're getting his support. 2 years later, it's like, listen, guys, what's the story with this Iraq war? What are you guys doing with the Iraq war? I'm not with it. Invasion of Iraq, seeing it as a destabilizing and outside the scope of counterterrorism. Now he's not showing support to some of the stuff that's going on. And how much did Iraq cost us? How much money? How many troops died? Then the color revolutions, the U.S. support for pro-democracy movements in former Soviet states such as Ukraine, Georgia, heightened Putin's suspicion of Western intentions. Like, wait a minute, guys, what are we doing? I'll give you support, but don't think for a moment I'm naive. What are we doing here? I'm not with this and I'm not with this. Don't blindly take my support that you can now do anything and I'll back you up. And in NATO expansion, even more going into Eastern Europe. Guys, at this point, we have a problem. You're not showing that you want peace here. You're showing that you want to paint me as an enemy. And how much more can I go sitting here wanting to make things good with you guys, but you guys keep pushing the envelope. Now this leads to 2004, 2005 Orange Revolution. You may have seen this documentary before. I think Oliver Stone did a good documentary on this. Protests in Ukraine were sparked by widespread allegations of electoral fraud during the 2004 presidential election, where Viktor Yanukovych was initially declared the winner over Viktor Yushchenko, but twice this happened, 04 and 14. However, demonstrations, civil disobedience, civil resistance, strike actions, revolt ordered by the Supreme Court of Ukraine that Viktor Yushchenko declared winner. At the same time, who had their hands on this? Couple NGOs. One of them was the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, and the other one was the Open Society Foundation, which you know who that's a part of, George Soros. So it gets a little bit tricky here. Wait a minute, this guy...
So that's sick, isn't it? So, okay, in this case, if you're Russia, yeah, so you see what's going on there. There is some influence from the United States into Ukrainian elections, allegedly. Like, most likely. So, but I'm not saying that probably Russia had some influence as well. 100%. 100%. I do remember that. So yeah, it was a weird situation. It's a weird one.
It wins, but you're not happy with them because this guy had no desire. Viktor Yanukovych, who had a decent relationship with Putin, had no desire to be part of NATO. And they're like, no, we don't want that. We want Ukraine to be part of NATO. Now imagine you're Putin. Wait a minute. All these promises, you want me to sit here? You just crossed the line. We now officially have a problem. That's why his motives are where they're at. Now, at the end of this 2008, 2012, Putin steps down. Dmitry Medvedev comes in because at the time they only had a two-term. Of course, later on it changes. But he steps down and tens of thousands of people participate in the 2011, 2012 Russian protests, also known as the Snow Revolution. Protests took place across major cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, with chants like Russia without Putin and United Russia is the party of crooks and thieves. Now, the Bolotnaya Square protests in Moscow were among the largest since the 1990s. Now, here's where it gets tricky. So these guys are protesting to not be for Putin, right? And in America, NGOs can pay people to protest. We don't have a law against that. It happens all the time. And it's a regular thing. Open Society has been behind it. Putin says, wait a minute, you guys want to pay these guys? This is allegedly, and some people can verify this, you guys are getting paid to protest against me, so you make me look like an idiot in Russia? No problem. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to make sure anybody that's taking money from any NGO, whether it's the National Endowment for Democracy or it's a USA, the United States Agency for International Development, anybody that's taking money from NGO, you have to declare it to everybody. You can't just go out there and take the money and fool the average Russian voter, not realizing what's really going on. By the way, you may or may not agree with whatever Putin's doing, but are you for NGOs paying people to be actors going outside, making a lot of ruckus, confusing the American people, and the media comes and says, oh, look, they're all against the president. They're all against the president. Look at all this stuff. Do you want to be manipulated? Do you want the American people to be manipulated? Because it happens in America all the time. He sits there and says, I'm not with the guys. You're not doing that. I think I need to come back. Now, imagine during this time, 2008, 2012, Putin's watching everything that's going on around the world. You have a lot of time, right? It's like, wait a minute, what's going on over here? What's going on over there? What is all this stuff? He's done, right? Assuming he's done. And he sees the global uprisings, Arab Springs, 2010, 2011. Well, what happened to Middle East leaders like Ben Ali from Tunisia, Mubarak from Egypt, or Gaddafi, Libya? Even in the documentary Putin's Revenge, Julia Loaf, who is part of that documentary, says that Putin is said to have been deeply affected by the way Muammar Gaddafi was killed. He watched a video of a bloodied Gaddafi dragged from his bunker, sodomized and shot over and over and over. Think about it, he's watching. It's like, wait a minute, what are they doing to a guy like this over and over? And he thinks he is doing everything to avoid a similar fate. He's doing the opposite. This is the report that's being given by Julia. He's watching all the stuff taking place. When he got killed, Gaddafi, it was October 20th, 2011. So this is the 4-year span that he's not running Russia. And he's saying, this is kind of weird. They went after Saleh from Yemen. Then he saw the color revolutions with what happened with Georgia. He's saying all these post-revolution, Orange Revolution, then overthrows, all these things that's going on. This is influencing him to sit there and say, wait a minute, the fear of Western influence. Saw these moments as U.S.-led effort to destabilize authoritarian regimes. He knows what he is. It's not like he's debating it. He knows what he is himself. Domestic parallels with Russian protests shared traits with these uprisings that is being paid by NGOs. All of this influences him to say, like, look, whether he wanted to come back all along or not, nobody knows, only he knows that. But all of this says, hey, no, listen, Dmitry, you're a good guy, but I think you're maybe a little bit of a pushover. This is Russia. I'm going to come back and defend this is my place. There's no way I'm going to let this happen to Russia. I'm coming back to clean house. And that influenced him to come back. Now.
Wow, that's an interesting take. You see, he's going very deep. I never thought of that, to be honest. I always thought that he's just Putin's puppet, you know what I mean? And he just literally just put it there just to put someone for a while. For like, everyone to chill out and be like, oh yeah, he's not Putin is not always in charge all his life, like dictator or stuff like that. So just, but no. So you see, he thought that he's weak, and he literally didn't do his job very well, and there was many issues going on around the world where it shouldn't be, and because of things that been going on in Russia as well. So he kind of decided to take over again. Uh, that's interesting as well. I know it's true, but I know Patrick Bader, he goes deep when it comes to this kind of things. So okay, let's go.
Right after Gaddafi dies, October 20th, 2011, month and a half later, December 4th, 2011, Putin wins. When he wins, he's going to come back and be the president. Hillary Clinton gets out there and says the following. In that time, says, as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton criticized Russia's parliamentary elections, calling them neither free nor fair, which reportedly angered Putin. So he comes back, and there's a few things he does immediately. Says, number one, he cracked down on dissent, restricted NGOs, used anti-Western rhetoric to undermine opposition. Putin blamed protests on foreign interference, particularly from U.S., and accused Western-funded NGOs of inciting unrest. A law passed in 2012 requiring NGOs receiving foreign funding to register as foreign agents. Think about it. You're getting money from an NGO. You have to come out and say, hey guys, I'm a foreign agent. If you didn't, you're breaking the law. Something very weird that you need to know about. February of 2008, the current CIA director under Biden, William J. Burns, at the time was a U.S. ambassador to Russia, authored a confidential cable titled Niet means Niet, Russia's NATO enlargement red lines. In this document, the current CIA director, former ambassador to Russia, he conveyed Russia's strong opposition to NATO's eastward expansion, particularly regarding Ukraine and Georgia. He highlighted that Russia's officials viewed such enlargement as a potential military threat and a violation of their security interests. Burns warned that pursuing NATO membership for Ukraine could lead to an internal divisions, violence, or even civil war, potentially compelling Russia to intervene. This is February of 08. Right now we're what? November of 2024. 16 years ago, current CIA director, former ambassador of Russia, saying, guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? 16 years ago, this guy knew what was going to take place, and is given a warning to U.S. And they're like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And by the way, you know who was president in 08? Obama. 1 month after inauguration, saying, don't mess with these guys. It could backfire on us. Boom. Now, many will say we're on the brink of World War III. If one of those hypersonic weapons, their missiles they're sending has a nuclear bomb in it, guess what happens then? Game changer, right? Now, you remember in 2004, that whole protesting that took place when the two victors were running, Yushchenko, who wanted Ukraine to be part of NATO, and the other victor, which was Viktor Yanukovych, who was like, no, we don't need to be part of NATO. I will have a better relationship with Putin. Guess what? Yushchenko becomes president from 2005 to 2010 for Ukraine. This is the third president of Ukraine. Then the other victor, who's kind of like, nah, I have no interest in being part of Ukraine. He then becomes president. 2010 to 2014, he now is the president. However, protesting in Ukraine gets so bad in November of 2013 after Yanukovych refused to sign an EU association agreement favoring closer ties with Russia. Many Ukrainians, especially in the west and center of the country, supported EU integration as a pathway to economic reform, democratic governance, and escape in Russia's influence. Anger at Yanukovych's perceived corruption and authoritarianism drove public discontent. It was so nasty that he had to leave, and it was no longer safe being in Ukraine. I believe he escaped to Russia, if I'm not mistaken. So you keep in mind, while this is taking place, the West is saying, no, this is all organic. It's what these people want. They want this. They want to join NATO. They want a better relationship with EU. They don't want to have anything to do with Russia. Putin saying, no, these people are not real. They're getting paid. And so the lady from the Frontline documentary done Putin's Revenge, she went on the streets asking the people in Ukraine who were protesting, hey, did somebody pay you? And you know what many of them said? Yes, we were paid. She has nothing to do with this. She's Frontline, PBS, doing a documentary, Putin's Revenge. No, a lot of these guys were paid by NGOs to go out there and make it seem like they wanted the other guy. This is your part where you get to pick and choose and believe who you want to believe. Some say, no wonder this happened. US and NGOs are being involved to make sure there's a fall because they don't want more peace there, because they want a guy that wants to join NATO because we need a bigger enemy to keep going after them. This is business for us, right? Again, this is all allegedly. You get to pick and choose which argument you want to believe. So now the next 8 years, you know what happens? It's the back and forth of Russia against NATO and each finding ways to piss the other one off. And this happens for 8 years. NATO expands the presence presence in Eastern Europe, which is Poland, Estonia, Latvia, military exercises. NATO's doing these large-scale military exercises, such as Defender Europe or Trident Juncture. At the same time, Russia's responding and doing its own military exercises. The Zapad exercises, showing them the fact that, hey, we're ready for simulating large-scale conflict with NATO forces. Then there's allegations of cyber attacks from Russia to NATO members such as Ukraine and others, like the NotPetya attack of 2017, and then disinformation campaigns from both sides. Meanwhile, Ukraine growing NATO aspirations, declared NATO membership as a strategic goal in 2019. Again, can you imagine, like, wait a minute, what are you guys doing here, right? Enshrining it in its constitution. NATO provided increased financial and military assistance to Ukraine. Russia viewed NATO's growing relationship with Ukraine as a direct threat to its security, citing NATO's 2008 Bucharest summit declaration that Ukraine and Georgia would eventually join the alliance. This keeps going back and forth, and it's getting more and more heated. Again, this leads to 2021, the military buildup near Ukraine. Russia amassed over 100,000 troops near Ukraine border in late 2021, citing security concerns, opposing NATO's continued expansion. NATO and Western leaders accused Russia of preparing for an invasion. Then this comes to December of 2021. Russia makes its demands that a guarantee Ukraine would never join NATO and removal of NATO military infrastructure from Eastern Europe. NATO rejects those demands.
That's where it is very, very interesting, because that's why I'm always thought that that is the main reason. That's what I'm leaning towards to. That is the actual reason why Russia invaded Ukraine. That now is the reason that because they just want to take Ukraine's land, and after invade Poland and invade Lithuania. It could be. I don't know. I'm not defending Putin in any way, right? It's his fault. He invaded Ukraine. It was his move, and it's a bad move. He's a bad guy here. But, like, this is a proof. It's a proof right there. That they asked for these demands, and they've been rejected by NATO, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. Continue.
Affirming Ukraine's right to determine its alliance. They're now backtracking on their promises that they had. And a couple months after that request, guess what happens? War. So at the end of the day, the question becomes motive. What is NATO's motive? What is US's motive? What is Ukraine's motive? What is Putin's motive? Everybody's motive, right? They can tell us whatever they want that we see all over TV and news and all these experts that are speaking, but you and I have to study history for ourselves, for yourself. Say, I don't know, what is their motive? Because motive for Russia could be, if you look at this map from 1500s of what happened to Russia from then, where Fedor was there, then Boris and all these guys, all the way up, you see how much territory they got. And when you think about Ukraine was under Russian or Soviet control for 337 years, from 1667 to 1991. All right, so Russia's motive is to say what? Ukraine is really ours. What are you guys talking about? This is none of your business. This is our property. What are you doing? And then NATO's point may be, well, Yeltsin was easy to negotiate with. He was a bit of a pushover, nice guy. He was like a globalist. Maybe we could have worked with him and done some of the stuff that we wanted to do. Dmitry was kind of easier. This guy, Putin, is a true believer, and we got to get rid of this guy because he's in the way. Because if NATO and US really wanted peace, why don't you allow him to join NATO? And if you do, you put certain guidelines in place. Yes, we want to entertain you being part of NATO, but we need you to do boom, 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 boom. Why don't you do that? Why isn't that conversation taking place? Why? Is it because the people that are given the money are tied to maybe some of these military industrial complex companies that are like, wait a minute, guys, we need a little bit of war? Are they trying to push?
That's what... I wish that's not true. I wish there is now such a deep corruption that they literally don't care about people's life, and they just want to have even these little tiny wars just to make money. Which is like... You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure there is some of it. It must be. It must be. But that's sad. If that's true, that is really sad. I don't know, guys.
Russia to get strong with BRICS, is that a good thing for the world? I don't know. But the most important thing we have to study is motive. Last night, my dad and I are sitting there. We're talking about different countries that have been destroyed because of war. And he says, how do they rebuild these countries? How do they do it? I said, major banks come in, like a Chase, like a BlackRock. Hey, $400 billion will rebuild your country at such a...
Yeah, like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, all of those big corporations, isn't it? That's what Zelensky was saying. What, maybe years, 2 years ago, I don't know, who's going to rebuild Ukraine. They making tons of money. And the other thing is the banks, the loans. The banks profit the most during the wars. The most. And that's a big motive as well. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's hard to understand exactly where it comes from. But I think it's maybe lots of little things and just the way it rolled out.
And such. And if the country doesn't pay the money back, what do you think is the collateral? Your natural resources. The banks are going to get their money. Like imagine if somebody, you say, hey, I need $500,000. You go to Joey, I'll give you $500,000. Based on what? Back it up based on $1 million equity you have in your property. If you don't return $500,000 to me within a year, I own your land. Collateral, right? So these big banks are going to come in and say, oh, let's rebuild Ukraine, $400 billion. What if we can't pay back? Don't worry, we're going to get your natural resources. You got plenty. Hey, we got to get this Putin knocked out of the way. Why? Because the number one country in the world with natural resources is not us. It's Russia. $75 trillion. And there's a man in the way. You know what his name is? Putin. That guy's got to get out the way so we can go in Russia and do business. It's a lot of money. The more you and I know motives, the more we can understand why every one of these guys are presenting their argument the way they are. And then you will be responsible on whose motives you believe and whose motives you don't. But at the end of the day, history will tell us whose position was right and whose wasn't. Sometimes we have to wait a year or two and sometimes decades to find out if you were right or others were right. That takes a while until we find that out. If you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to find out more about the history of NATO, if you've never seen it, like what they've done, click here to watch the video. I think you're going to like the video.
Yeah, that was very interesting take. That was very interesting take, and that's what I like about Patrick Bet-David content, because they go deep. They bring you all the evidence as much as possible, and yeah, many thoughts he presented into this video I wasn't even thinking about. Right, when Putin wasn't a president, and the reason why he kind of gone back to be a president, to kind of to fix things again back to how it used to be, which is crazy. And that could be the case. That could be the case. He saw like everything is just going sideways, all the wars around the world and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. But seems like it. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I really have to go now. I'll try to go back live tomorrow. I guess I'm just super busy at the moment. Like, lots of things going on. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. That would really help me out, because it's only my, I think, third or fourth live stream so far. And yeah, comment as well what you guys think. What is your opinion, right? And I'll see you next time, guys. Take care.